All right, so good afternoon. My name's Jessica Alexander. I'm an attorney in the Senior Law Unit at CCLA. I am here with the Honorable Judge Mary Rudd Robinson, who is the first African American woman in the judiciary in Broward County's history. So, Judge, thank you for being here. Um, we just wanted to get to know you a little bit. I know you grew up in North Carolina. We were hoping you could tell us what that was like.
Um, I think you were at the history program, and I said the history program that I grew up in the segregated South, and it was segregated at the time. I like to say I lived on a cusp because most of my childhood was lived in segregation.
Okay.
That meant that you went to separate schools. You, I think I remarked about how you had separate bathroom facilities, like public facilities, like if you went to J.C. Penney, and I use J.C. Penney as an example because it still exists.
Right.
J.C. Penney, the store still exists, but you had a black designated bathroom and a white designated bathroom, and you had the same thing for the water fountains. It's just sort of interesting because I can remember one of our department stores downtown. I grew up outside of Burlington, North Carolina, and Burlington, North Carolina, incidentally, is outside of Greensboro, North Carolina, and a skip and a hop from Durham and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I say that because a lot of civil rights activity was going on at the time that I was growing up. You had the sit-ins in Greensboro at the Woolworth store, and the Woolworth was the 5 and dime, which I don't think we have 5 and dimes now, but everything was supposed to be 5 cent, 10 cent. It was a really
Okay.
It came up from maybe from the Dust Bowl, beginning of like 1900s. These things,
Like a soda shop?
Yeah, well, yeah, it had a little dining area in the middle,
Okay.
and the shopping was all around, sort of like and you guys wouldn't remember this either, sort of like the pharmacy used to be.
Okay.
Because in the pharmacy you would go, it was like the soda fountain. The pharmacy had the soda fountain. And when you went to get anything, even medicines or whatever, you could also go get a an ice cream cone or the I call them the soda fountains, but it had, it's like the Coca-Cola, and they put the ice cream in it. I forget what they
a root
called
beer
it.
float
Yeah, some kind of float, a
Okay.
soda float. And those kinds of things you had
Okay.
back then. But we, meaning Black folk, could not we could go to the counter to get the food, but we couldn't sit down and eat it. So we couldn't go there, sit like you do today and order, and then eat our food. We had to order it, and then we had to leave.
Okay.
And so the sit-ins in North Carolina at the Woolworths, which my parents, and we used to shop there all the time, by the way. That's what the students from North Carolina A&T University, so we're not going to do this anymore. So they went there and they sat, demanding that they be served and that they be able to eat what they ordered at the counter.
Okay.
And some of these things seems like it's really simple, but those are things that you couldn't do.
Sure.
Even like today, you didn't want to be caught in certain areas if you were in the city, because it's why are you there? You need to stay where you folk live, and we'll stay over here. But I grew up in the country, and the country was a little bit different than the city. And you still had all the segregationist ideas that you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. But the difference in the country was you lived by each other. And that was probably because the area outside of Burlington was farmland. And my ancestors owned property. My great-grandfather had a big farm, and my grandfather had a big farm, and so they raised tobacco and other crops, but tobacco was the main crop. And because they were landowners, your land may abut to somebody who didn't look like you. Okay. And that's all right. You got along as far as that was concerned, but it was still, I didn't go to your school, you didn't go to my school, still the same way that I told you when you went shopping or anything like that, and you were expected to stay on your side. But the country was just a little different because everybody lived by each other
Okay.
because they owned land that abutted, and that was okay. Um, so it was very interesting until I was a freshman in high school. And then through a lot of the strides of Brown versus Board of Education, some other things, when I got ready to go to high school, they had what you would call freedom of choice. And so with the freedom of choice, what it did was you chose which place you wanted to go to.
Okay.
And that meant that I had always been bused. So busing was nothing new there. So I'd always been bused. You're in the country, you can ride a bus anyway. But I would have to go past an elementary middle school to get to my school, even though that was closer.
Sure.
And the high school was really only a skip and hop from where I lived, but we got bused somewhere else. But by the time I got to high school, my freshman year, they had what you call freedom of choice. And I chose to go to the high school that was closest to me. And I went along. I had a cousin who was a year ahead of me. I had two cousins. One was a year ahead of me, and one was 2 years ahead of me. And I don't exactly know why I chose to go to the one closest to me, except that and all my friends were going to the one that they would send us to, so-called Black High School.
Okay.
But I went to the high school closest to me. The very next year, they said, okay, we're not going to have this. Everybody's going to the school closest to them.
Okay.
And then it was really integration, and the integration desegregation went from there. It sort of expanded out after that.
Okay.
So by the time I am graduating from high school, I ended up going to the University of North Carolina, and not necessarily because it was my first choice. And I can tell you, I'm a Tar Heel to my heart. I'm also an Eagle to my heart. But I was going to Vanderbilt. That was my idea. I was going to Vanderbilt. I was going into nursing, and I had a guidance counselor. And the guidance counselor said, "Why don't you try?" Or she recommended that I try UNC Chapel Hill.
Okay.
Which is very interesting. And I say this because my guidance counselor did not look like me either. And normally the stories I hear from my friends, in fact, I had one friend that ended up at UNC Chapel Hill because his guidance counselor told him he couldn't get in. So it wasn't normally where somebody would direct you, even if they looked like you. But certainly if they didn't look like you, they would not recommend you go there. But she recommended that I go there. She said, "Why don't you try for this?" So I did. And I actually ended up trying for early decision.
Okay.
So by December 15th of my senior year, I had gotten an acceptance letter already from Carolina.
Okay.
And so I decided to go to Carolina.
And you were a cheerleader there,
I was
right?
a cheerleader at Carolina, but I was a cheerleader in high school.
Okay.
And so I just decided, well, I liked cheering. I didn't see any reason why I couldn't do it in college. I've never seen a lot of things as impediments,
Sure.
even if they hadn't had one before. Now, we actually found out that they had one before, a black male. And maybe it's been about 5 years ago now. I went back and we did like a symposium. A friend of mine was doing a symposium on Black cheerleaders at Carolina. And so we invited him because when we were there, we didn't know that he existed.
Right.
And it was just very heartwarming as well as heart-wrenching because he told us what it was like when he was on the squad, which was not the experience that we had had.
Sure.
Nobody talked, none of the cheerleaders talked to him. The entire time he was on the squad, they didn't talk to him. They wouldn't invite him anywhere. I mean, it was like total isolation for him. And those are things that we didn't experience when we went out for the squad. But however, there weren't any between him and when I got on the squad, there weren't any other Black cheerleaders, male or female.
Okay.
So it was interesting. But everybody was very warm about my being on the squad. I didn't have a problem on the squad. Um, it was interesting. But I enjoyed my time at Carolina.
Right.
I did have a lot of friends still to this day from uh, Carolina. So, and we see each other. We're very close. Um, so experience was good.
Okay. And you went to law school in North Carolina
I
as
went
well.
to law school. I went to North Carolina Central University, which actually is just down the street from Carolina in Durham. And actually, that is a very good place. I think I would recommend going to either one of those schools in what I call the triangle, because you had UNC Chapel Hill, you had North Carolina Central, and you had Duke. And we're all like the schools are very close together. And in law school, you could take courses back and forth.
Okay.
If you wanted to.
Between the schools.
Between the schools.
Okay.
Either I took a course one summer at Carolina. I had friends who took a course at took courses at Duke. And that part was very, very nice. The schools worked good together. But I enjoyed going to Central. I didn't try to go anywhere else. I didn't even apply to Carolina. I wanted the different experience, and I enjoyed being on a Black college campus.
Okay. So the Central University Law School was predominantly a Black law school, right?
Predominantly, yes.
Okay.
The university is predominantly Black.
Okay. I know you mentioned before that earlier on there wasn't admission opportunities for Black students at UNC, correct?
That's true.
Okay. So a lot of these things can make someone feel discouraged. And you mentioned that you weren't intimidated by these things. How did you overcome that? Given your childhood and
No, I never looked at anything as being something necessarily you had to, or an impediment, or and I think it had a lot to do with family.
okay.
I think that if you are have a good family life, which I did, and I would say that I always felt loved. I was always pushed. Like my parents told me, neither one of my parents went to college. My mother had the high school diploma, my dad did not. And for the most part, the family didn't have that. If they went to high school, that was good.
Mhm.
My dad had a very decent job though, because he worked for a trucking firm, and it was unionized.
Okay.
So it was I know it's the Teamsters.
Oh, okay.
My dad was a Teamster. And I think I still remember the union number, his union number. But that didn't happen necessarily either. We were just very, very blessed when it came to that. That's the other thing. I think we had a strong faith. Everything was always rooted in the church when I was growing up. My mom was very active in the NAACP, and we were always pushing for the church was civil rights oriented.
Okay.
Voting, and I laugh. I tell people my mom had me outside the voting polls when I was, as they say, knee high to a goat. I can remember going to campaign functions and big rallies, where barbecue rallies and stuff like that with her. And the area at the time was just very, they were very involved. We had people went down in March with Dr. King, and just always doing something in the community. And I'm not sure that is necessarily that way now, but certainly when I was growing up in that era, it was, because you were looking to get voting rights, which seems, if as an American citizen, is something you're supposed to have anyway. But you had the voting rights of the Act of 1964, which they're still talking about. They're currently talking about. So it was just an era of big change, I thought, when I grew up. But I just never, I guess I pretty much had no fear. I don't know why. I
Okay.
think it's just the upbringing and all the things that were going on, and your parents pushing you, because they always said to my brother and I that you're getting an education. You're going to get your education, and they didn't really care where we went to school as long as we got our education, and that's what happened,
Sure.
So yeah.
And these experiences, do you feel like they motivated you to pursue a career in law or?
Probably, I don't know if I ever really thought about it because I was at Carolina and I didn't think about law school or anything until maybe graduation. And I
Right.
thought, well, I might go to law school. And I know exactly why I thought that. I said, I might go to law school. And then I thought, well, I might be too emotional to go to law school. So I sort of put it in the back of my mind. I got out, I sort of, at the time I graduated, it was like really hard to find a job. You have these lulls and highs. Sometimes it's easy to find a job,
Mhm.
easier when you get out because things are really bustling. But when I got out, things were not really bustling. And then I ended up, I decided I'm going to apply for law school. I went by the law school, and because it was close,
Sure.
actually,
Mhm.
it was in Durham. So I went by the law school, asked for an application. The young lady said they were not out for the fall.
Okay.
But she said, if I'll take your name and address, and when they come in, I will mail you one. And true to her word, that's what she did. I never went back down, but when they came in, she had taken my name and address, and she mailed me the application.
Okay.
So I filled it out. I got everything that I needed for the application. It was funny because a friend of mine, we both went, and she told us both the same thing, but I was the one who followed through with it.
Okay.
Now, in all honesty, my friend ended up getting her doctorate in education some years later, but um, I got it. And in between the time I filled out the application and sent everything in, I got what was a pretty decent job for my era. I got a job as a recreation director. Director, I didn't even have to get recreation director for a small city, and they were paying me what was a good salary at the time, $10,000 a year.
Okay.
So that was actually good money. Um, so I did that, and I came home one day, and I we had a over our sink. We had a little thing where you put the mail.
Mhm.
And I was at the sink doing something, and I looked up, and I saw a letterhead from North Carolina Central, and I asked, when did this come? And nobody knew.
Mhm.
But whenever it came, at least they did one thing. They put it in that letter, when I opened it up, I had been accepted, and they'd given me a tuition scholarship.
Okay.
And I needed to let them know if I were coming by a certain date,
Sure.
but the date had passed.
Oh, okay.
So I said, well, when did this come? And nobody knew.
Right.
So I actually got on the phone and I called North Carolina Central. I asked to speak to the dean. They actually let me speak to the dean. And I explained to him what had happened. And I asked him, I said, can I still come?
Mhm.
And he said, do you still want to come? I said, yes. And he said, then you can still come. That's it.
And what was your major in
Oh,
undergrad?
now don't even ask. This is, I give a lot of speeches to young kids, especially kids going off to school.
Mhm.
And I tell them, I said, it really doesn't matter what you major in.
Right.
I found out it doesn't even matter what you major in if you want to go to medical school. Because I had a friend who he went to medical school. He was smart, but I told him he had really good sense because what he did was he majored in psychology,
Okay.
which you're not going to get a lot of. It is a science, but you're not going to have to go through what you go through for biology or zoology or
Of
something like
course.
that.
Yeah.
And so when I went to school, I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist. That's what I said when I went.
Okay.
Um, but the zoology and biology and the labs, I don't know if any of you have ever
Organic
gone through that.
chemistry.
Yeah, in college,
Right.
this is not something the faint of heart wants to do.
Right.
So I said, I don't think that's going to happen. So I took a lot of I took business law and sociology and a lot of English courses and some other things. And then it got to be my junior year, and I said, what am I going to do? And I tell kids, I said, it's okay if you don't know what you want to
Hmm.
do, because I'm like, what am I going to major in? And my thing was, though, I'm getting out of this university with a degree,
Right.
and I'm getting out in 4 years.
Hmm.
So I looked to see what I had hours in and how many hours I needed for certain things.
Hmm.
And that's how I decided what my degree was in. And I got my degree in recreational therapy.
Oh, okay. Which landed you your first job.
Right, which landed me on my first start. And you had to do an internship for that, believe it or not, which was very interesting because you do a lot of things that it is therapy. My internship was with autistic children.
Okay.
So it was very interesting.
Sure.
And I still remember them and their names and
Wow.
and their skill sets
Hmm.
and everything to this day from the internship.
Okay.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you finished law school, did you go to legal services right away or?
No, no, this is what happened. I went to law school, and after my sophomore year, I got an internship with Durham Legal Services. And that was after the first year. After the second year, I had an internship with Hillsborough or Orange County Legal Services, which was the county over. And I just kept that. It went from the summer through the entire year,
Okay.
which I didn't stop working with them until um, probably June or July, not June, before I came down here to take the. No, wait a minute. I'm trying to wait. Maybe I worked for them longer than that. I must have worked for them longer than my senior year. I think I worked for them also after school, after I graduated from law school. But the thing about that was, I think, was interesting. I was trying to determine whether or not you needed a certification. You're like, now, if you're going to come from law school and you're going to be in the courtroom, you
Right.
need some kind of certification or certificate.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember having to do that in North Carolina.
Okay.
If you were in law school, I think that they must have let you go. Then they let you represent without an attorney. Like that's the other thing too.
Right.
Here you get your certification, but you're sort of overseen
Yes, I
by
think
a licensed attorney or whatever.
correct. Yeah.
Back then, you didn't, I don't remember having to have a certification.
Oh,
And certainly if I had the certification, it was enough that I was in law school.
hmm.
And it might have determined, it might have been what year you were in law school. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, so I went to court. I did Social Security hearings. I did by myself. I went to court. I did family law cases, like the motions, not the actual
Hmm.
divorce things. I went to court by myself. I just don't remember it being, I didn't have to take anybody with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know what they do now.
Yeah.
And they may do the same thing that Florida does.
Hmm.
But a lot of law schools, and we had a clinic at Central, which makes me feel like Central was beyond, sorry, Duke and Carolina, but beyond Duke and Carolina, because we had a clinic.
Right.
And I think that getting experience before you graduate in what actually happens in a courtroom or a hearing room is invaluable. And I just believe that too many people come out of law school, and I feel like you don't know what you don't know when you come out of law school. A lot of people come out feeling like they know everything,
Sure.
and you don't know anything. You've
Right.
not been anywhere. You've not had any hearings.
No practical
No
experience.
practical experience, and that's where I think COVID has really hurt the
Right.
legal profession as far as younger attorneys are concerned, because you get no experience. This is looking at you on telly, a laptop, that does not cut it for everyday real life experiences,
Sure. Mhm.
and it also hampers your
All
ability
right, so good afternoon. My name's Jessica Alexander.
communicate.
I'm an attorney in
Mhm.
the senior law
With
unit at CCLA.
someone who
I
has an
am here with
opposite
the
opinion than
Honorable
yours.
Judge Mary Rudd Robinson,
Um,
who is the
and I
first
think we have to
African
work at
American
those
woman
things.
in the
Sure.
in
Yeah.
the and so once you left Orange County, you then came to Florida,
I
or
ended up taking the Florida bar, which I passed. And so then it was time to look for a job. And I was engaged. My husband's a Florida native. He's born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. And I was looking in, and I always give them a plug because that's where I found it, the West Side Gazette.
okay,
And the West Side Gazette is the oldest Black newspaper in Broward County. And I was reading the West Side Gazette, and they had an ad in there for two attorneys for legal aid.
okay,
So I applied, came in, interviewed with Tony, and I guess I was the first person he interviewed. So he said to me, he says, "Well, which one do you want?" And I'd done both of them in North Carolina. I'd done the Social Security hearings, and I'd done family law. So I decided to do the family law because I knew that got me into court. And the other one was just administrative here. You go to the administrative judge, and I preferred to go to actual court. And so that's the one he gave me.
Okay. And I know you talked about being the only family law attorney for a
Yeah.
little while. What
It
was
was
that
busy.
experience like? Yeah.
It was really busy. Because you did everything, and I can remember, and that's why I said Tim was invaluable. I give Tim a plug, my paralegal. He was just great. Sometimes I say, well, I need a case that says XYZ for this, and he would find me that case. And I said, it's funny because when I came, I realized that he'd been doing this. And I think that's the thing we have to. I don't have any shame. I knew he knew more than I did.
Right.
But eventually I knew more than he did.
Right.
But to begin with, he knew more.
Sure.
And that was okay with me.
Right.
And I don't think that we should get all bent out of shape because we think our support staff over here thinks they know more than I do. Well, sometimes they actually do know more than you do.
And we learn.
And and you learn from them, and you need to respect that.
Of course.
So I had Tim, I had several different secretaries, but I was in court every day. I went to court every day, Monday through Friday. Every morning there were hearings, and sometimes there were long hearings. But the thing about the family law was you practiced before private attorneys, and some of them were considered to be like tops in their fields. And you had a lot of hearings before the magistrate, and you did a lot of depositions. I mean, that's why I said I was busy,
Right.
very busy. And also getting kids back for their parents because they were kidnapped by the non-custodial parent, and they came the farthest they could come, which was Florida. Then I have to find them, get the writ, go to the police department, get the police department to go get the kid, and even sometimes the other way around, because one time I had to try and get a child back from California that had been taken by the father from Florida. So it was a lot of experience, and it was a lot. And this is all just the one person. Oh, and in addition to that, you did your own appeals. Wow. So when you got appeal, I had to do the appeal. And so I had to do the case law, go argue before the 4th DC, which I did. And it was just, this is what you, now I don't know what you do now.
I mean, this is all before e-filing and everything.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes.
Okay. And your experiences here, did the work bear resemblance to the work in North Carolina when you were with?
Well, I think that the work here, of course, is more because in North Carolina, I just did the hearings. Okay. I didn't do the actual divorces or and I wasn't there that long, really. And it wasn't like full time necessarily because I'm in law school. So the summers, yeah, but this is really your job, and this was the day to day thing. And you met a lot of people though. The thing
Sure.
was, because I was in court all the time, every day, the judges got to know you.
Right.
You know, they knew who you were. And is this is funny, but they knew who I was because I was the only one they saw. Not the only attorney, family law attorney for legal aid, but as far as Black females go, I was pretty much it for what they saw.
Okay.
No matter where I was pretty much it. And they remembered you. If you did good, they remembered you.
Right.
If you did bad, they remembered you. But I like being prepared, so I didn't go to, court without being prepared.
Sure.
And I'm sure that you still get this maybe even today at legal aid. I can remember going to court with a client, and they'd have maybe an older child with them. And I remember one lady saying to me, she says, "Well, when are you going to be a real attorney?" And her son said, "Mama, she is a real attorney." But they come to legal aid, and for some reason they would think they weren't getting a real attorney. But sometimes, but you have and then there were newsworthy cases that you were actually in the newspaper for. Some of these I call them high profile child custody cases or whatnot. Yeah. So it was quite an experience. It was. And we only had, the other thing is we only had 3 magistrates there when I was there.
Okay.
And I always laugh. I said, it takes how many to do? Because everything they do, we did.
Wow. But
it's just the 3 of us. We did the probate, we did the family law. I used to go out and do the mental health hearings, and we had it divided up into quadrants. So I did South County.
Okay.
And somebody else would do North, and then somebody would do like Imperial Point and whatever that one was, the other hospital was. And that's how we broke it up. But it's just 3 of us.
Right.
And we had no GPS. And that's why I laughed. I said, I can get around. And in Broward, like I said, my husband's a native. And so he said to me, he says, look, the county is divided up. You start with Broward and Andrews. And this quadrant here, this is the southeast and southwest, northeast, northwest. And Broward and Andrews break it up, east and west, north and south.
So you knew your way around.
Well, I learned my way around.
Right.
Yeah.
So after you left legal aid, you became a general magistrate.
Yes.
And you were the first
Black general magistrate, period. In Broward.
And did your time as a family law attorney shape your time served as a magistrate? Do you feel like?
Well, it was certainly helpful.
Right.
All I imagine was family law, yes. But I think, whatever experiences I had at legal aid plus all my life experiences shaped how I am in court and beyond. Yeah.
And from general magistrate, you were elected to the judiciary.
I was appointed and then elected. Yes.
Appointed, okay, which you served for 27 years.
A little over that, but
right, as the first Black female in our county. I can only imagine what that was like. I mean, I know you've mentioned before in articles that people didn't always take you seriously.
Well, they didn't even think you were the judge.
Right.
I can remember, just this is outside court, of course. I took my staff to lunch for Christmas one year, and my JA had set it up, and she said it's the Judge Robinson and and so they knew when they were there. And when it came time for the bill, he says, "Well, I'm supposed to give this to Judge Robinson. Where is he?" And I said, "He is right here."
Right.
Yes.
Wow. And in the almost 3 decades that you served, did you see a lot of changes? Are you happy with the progress?
Yeah, I am. Like I said, when I first came, there was one other attorney, Black female, that would go to court sometime.
Okay.
But other than that, and I knew one that had been here, but she was no longer here. She had been in the PD's office, and she was now in Miami-Dade,
Okay.
which happened to be a fellow Tar Heel, by the way. Although I didn't know her when we were
Okay.
at Carolina, she was there before me.
Mhm.
Um, and then it was like just me, and I don't have any problem. I'm happy to see more of people who look like me,
Right.
and like now are more people in general, because I think that you need a diverse group of people, because we are a diverse group of people.
Sure.
So if you just see one people want, when they go into a courtroom, they want to see people who look like them. They don't have to see it all the time,
Right.
but they want to know that there's somebody there
Of course.
that looks like them. So yeah, I'm really happy with the advancement in the judiciary, the advancement in the attorneys.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. So you feel it's important for civil litigants, or even if a defendant appears
civil,
before
criminal, or
you?
whatever.
Okay. So 3 decades spent on the bench, and now you retired in 2016.
Mhm.
How are you enjoying retirement
I'm
now?
loving it.
Yeah.
I mean, I retired. I said, no, I can do this. At the time, my mother was still living, and she was in North Carolina. I was going back and forth,
Okay.
and I wanted to have time to be able to do that without any problems. Look after her, and then my husband and I have 3 children, and 2 of them don't live here.
Okay.
So in the state of Florida,
Mhm.
so I knew that I wanted to go back and forth where they were concerned. And I wanted to be able to travel and enjoy life.
Right.
And I wanted to be able to do it when I could travel and enjoy life.
Of course.
So I decided to retire. And I think, too, there are some changes. I think there's some things that um, we need to think about. Like I said, uh, new attorneys come in, they think they know everything.
Mhm.
Not all of you, but some of you.
Sure.
And I'm like, you don't know this. Or I get older attorneys. I remember one guy told me once he was impeaching a witness. Wrong, I might add.
Mhm.
So I come and I said, you know, you're not doing this right. I sustained the objection. And he informed me, well, he had been teaching this, and he knew how to impeach a witness. And I said, well, first of all, if this is the way you've been teaching it, you've been teaching it wrong. Uh, but first, before that, first you're in my courtroom,
Mhm.
and the buck stops here. Is what I say. This is the way
Right.
you impeach. And there are 2 attorneys here, and I remember when one of them came to my um, retirement event that the organization gave for me. She came up to me and she said, "Judge, you were right." Um, but she had to go look it up. See, it wasn't enough that I said. But she came up to me, she said, "Judge, you were right." I said, "Yeah, I know."
Mhm.
And that's not to say that I'm always right,
Of course.
because nobody's always right.
Mhm.
And you can be wrong. I can
Mhm.
be wrong. That's why I never mind if you appeal me. That is not some kind of negative where I'm concerned.
Mhm.
You have the right to appeal, and I don't mind being appealed, or I didn't mind being appealed.
Okay.
So,
Sure. So it's that accepting, when you're wrong, and
yeah.
being willing to take a lesson. So, Judge, what advice would you have for, I guess, youth of our generation that want to pursue a career in law, especially people of color?
Well, I would tell them, first of all, don't give up on your dream if that's a dream of yours.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always some way to, to make it through, because when I went to law school, I really had no money.
Mm-hmm.
Now I got my saving grace was I didn't, even though it was the next county over, actually 2 counties over, but it wasn't that far. So the first year and a half, I drove back and forth to class. I
Okay.
stayed at home, and I had the tuition scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second year, I got a job, and I did an aftercare for 27 second graders, of which 25 of them were boys. I kid you not. I don't know how you can come from, the school was across the street. It was at a church. The school was across the street from the church, and it was very convenient for parents, and so they would come from the school over to the church, and you had your own classroom. And how they all got to be boys in second grade, I will never know.
Right.
But I had 25 second graders, and well, it was 27, 25 of them were boys.
Right.
I said, this is crazy. But I did that for the entire year, and I had to be at work at 2 o'clock. I got out of class at 1:50. Don't ask me how I got there in 10 minutes. Because I had to get in my car and drive. It wasn't far, but I had to get in the car and drive from the law school to Research Triangle Park.
Okay.
And then I worked from 2 to 6 every day. Then I had to fight the traffic home because, of course, if you got off at 6 o'clock, you're in the middle of afternoon traffic to
Right.
in Orange County and Durham County. And I did that for a year and a half before I was able to move to my own place in Durham County.
Okay.
And was closer to, of course, to the law school. But I think, you do what you have to.
Right. No impediment.
Yeah. No impediments. You just do what you have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I don't know if you had any more questions for Judge.
This was so good.
Yes. Thank you, Judge. You made it so easy. I just let you talk.
You just let me run my mouth.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out to speak with us.
Anytime I got my start here, right?
Yes,
Right?
that's why we're so honored to
know,
have you.
I mean, I love legal aid.
Yes.
And not just because I got my start here. I think that, legal aid is something that's needed. And we always say, well, you have a public defender for people who have charges and cannot represent themselves or afford an attorney in criminal, but what does a civil person do?
Of course.
And I would think particularly in family law, because you can just get run over, even in Social Security, which I did. So those two things that I did, but
we have 3 units for each of the things you mentioned: public benefits like Social Security, family law, which assists victims.
It's way more than what we had.
Yes.
Oh, then let me say this about legal aid too. Tony was the best.
Tony, correct.
He was. When I came, of course, you didn't make that much money. But the thing that you did, you of course you had the benefits, you had your insurance and whatnot. But they would pay for all like they paid for my bar, not my bar dues, but
Your
Broward County,
okay.
The organizations,
Sure.
they would pay for those. And then by the time I left, they actually allowed me to do a family law seminar. So I did a half-day seminar on family law, and had speakers come in, and private attorneys came in. It was over at the Ramada Inn that's off 84, if anybody knows where that is, right on Marina Mile.
Okay.
And he's just very good.
Right.
So I thought what you didn't get in the money part, really the rest of the experience made up for that.
Absolutely.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I love working here. I feel like we're very community oriented. It's not just meeting with clients, but we go out into the community and educate on legal rights and things that the average layperson may not know. So, well, thank you again,
Well,
Judge.
you're welcome.
I appreciate it.